It's 6:31, January 12th, 2022, and I'm calling this meeting of the Transportation and Transit Commission to order. First item of business is a roll call, and Elizabeth Ward is excused or is not going to be here. I think she indicated. Rich Tate, are you hearing me?
I'm right here. Hi, guys.
Troy?
Here.
Jason Strauss, I haven't seen. I am here. Bill Horns, Mike Gronetsky.
Here.
And Gabriella.
Here.
So we have 5 of 7, that's a quorum. And we're ready to go. Are there any, is there anybody there, City Hall? With
Not
a
for
comment about a non-agenda item?
No.
Nobody's there and nobody's online for that purpose. So we can skip that. Approval of agenda is the next item. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I'll move
So
to
moved.
approve.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. Is there any comment or suggestions for changing that agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving it, say aye.
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 Aye, opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Minutes, approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last time, from December 9th?
I
I
make a
move
mo-
approval of the minutes.
Gabriella moves approval, second.
Second. Troy.
I think that was Rich.
There's Troy.
And is there any discussion about the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We are just flying through this stuff. The first topic, substantive thing on agenda is under review items, is review of transportation planning and policy documents. And Andrew has provided us with a list of documents to think about. And Andrew, why don't you introduce this topic for us?
Sure. Yeah, so this is something we talked a little bit about at the end of last year, kind of prioritizing different meetings to focus on plans. And I think one of the big things I heard from folks was that it'd be good just kind of to reorientate existing members and new members on what some of these what's some of the contents in these plans and policies, and maybe to prioritize a meeting or a few meetings in 2022 to focus on them. And so I think the idea of this review would be, I mean, I certainly can go through all of these very briefly or just give kind of a high level overview, but otherwise it's just maybe prioritizing and kind of getting a list so that we can start in either February or March and start going through these one by one. And I'm certainly happy to also take direction on how you guys would like to proceed in these review sessions, that sort of thing.
Okay.
If you want me to prepare something so.
Okay. Well, I don't think we need to take time to discuss the substance of each of these. We should know in general what each one is. But something else I wanted to ask you, are there any deadlines or scheduled actions in the year that pertain to any of these? In other words, are there reference dates that we should have in mind for any of these?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would certainly say towards the beginning of the year, transit's going to be big. As soon as that draft network gets released, I'm certainly committing to having multiple public meetings to kind of talk about what the network redesign looks like. I think using some of our transit or TTC meetings to reintroduce folks to the 2010 transit plan and the 2015 intercity transit feasibility study. I think those would be good documents, as well as the 2030 comp plan. I think all three of those could be very relevant there. As far as other ones, certainly I've talked a little bit about the neighborhood traffic management process. I think towards the spring, as we start to get more of those requests, I think that would be a good time as well to talk about that. And I know we've also talked a little bit about the bike and pedestrian plan in terms of past projects. I'm sure we'll have additional elements come up in new projects throughout the year, so that would be another good one. Yeah, I can't think of too many other kind of timeline things throughout the year.
Okay. Well, with that, does anybody else have a comment or a thought on this topic?
Yeah, this is Rich. Going through the transportation, the first dot, the transit plan 2010 to 2014, it spoke a lot about the Regional Transit Authority, and I thought that was pretty much killed by the Walker administration. What's the scoop? What's the status with that? Because that's something that, to me, is where the future is. The growth is not just within Fitchburg, but with the whole metropolitan area. Could you address or correct me if I'm wrong?
No, I think that's correct. Yep. I think both those plans, or at least the 2010 plan and then some of the prior plans, I think talked a little bit more about the RTA. I think that viability has since greatly reduced. I'm not saying it's certainly through the current administrations and future that could change, but I think from my understanding that's not really something that's on the table right now.
Andrew, Troy, I think, I know the mandatory aspects of surrounding counties were cut off, and I think,
The financial tax collection was.
yeah,
cut
yeah,
off.
including tax collection, and the municipalities and townships, I think there's an option too, but could you clarify that from the, exactly what regional authorities exist? Is it just voluntary, or is, I think all the mandatory aspects have been done, but I think within Dane County, we still have regional planning, is my understanding.
Yeah, MPO, yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly, the MPOs and the RPCs. So there's still regional planning authorities. But yeah, from my understanding, mainly from the taxing authority perspective, that, the typical RTA structure that you're taxing a district to kind of fund a regional transit service. I think that's really what had been removed from possibility. But I can certainly follow up on that. I'm not super familiar with that specific legislation, but I know generally speaking, RTAs are less viable now.
Okay.
Well,
All right. I had one thing I wanted to mention related to the intra-city transit feasibility study, or maybe embedded in this or parallel to it, I'm not sure, but I have a special interest in an idea that the Friends of the Fitchburg Senior Center and Joe McCone have discussed, and I think some alders, maybe Gabriella, you've been in on those conversations about somehow finding a way to acquire a special purpose van and talking to the city into funding, supporting it in some fashion. And it's in a very much the discussion phase. The Friends of the Fitchburg Senior Center are interested in that and interested in trying to help make it happen. And we have some resources to put to that, so we're very interested. And speaking now as a member of the Friends, I guess, I just wanted to highlight that interest that exists. And my thought or my question is, if that's going to come to find some expression in the next city budget, what kind of dates or deadlines are we looking at for that process, for that budgeting process? If there were an interest in the council to make that happen, and I assume that the Transportation and Transit Commission can take a position one way or another on that idea too.
So I could jump in real quick.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I thought that was going to you. Yep.
Yeah, so there's one thing I was going to announce in my report, but I'll just mention it now, is we're dealing right now with the American Rescue Plan federal funds that gone to the city, $3.2 million that have restricted uses. And then we have a TID closure, TID number 6 is closing, and there'll be about $2 million that we expect to come back to the city at the closure of the TID in the fall of this year. So this council is starting a spending plan, which we're working on currently. The mayor is currently putting together his initial proposal, which is going to be released on January 24th. And there is specifically with the TID money, I know for sure it would qualify for the TID money. You could potentially do an upfront capital purchase for the bus or the van or whatever it would be. So if the Friends of the Senior Center hasn't already put together a proposal and asked the mayor to include that in his proposal, they should consider doing that soon. I'm sure that Jill McComb has a familiarity with the process, hopefully. So she should ask the mayor to see if he'll consider that. If he chooses not to, there is an amendment process for the alders that can happen. I would think that Dave Herbst, who's the alder representative for the senior center, for the Committee on Aging would be possibly a good choice for that amendment, but also, I'd be willing to consider it as the member for the transportation. I'm happy to talk about that as an amendment process. In terms of, the only problem with that is that you could do the capital purchase, right, with those funds, but there would be ongoing costs with the car and potentially a staff member to run that car, which would be an operating budget expense.
Yeah.
So if it becomes a part of the ARPA TID spending plan, the next step would be to get it to the CIP, which typically is mid-year, and the proposals come out on the early end, and I'm sure that Jill McComb is already thinking about including that as a capital improvement plan, as a capital expense. And then in the operating budget, which the process starts later in the year, with adoption in October typically, that would have to be part of the operating expenses going forward. So there's definitely potential, but there's a lot of steps it needs to go through. But the first step would be having the mayor consider putting it in his initial spending plan proposal for those one-time, that $5.2 million bucket of one-time funds.
And is that, when you talk about an amendment, that's an amendment to the current budget for the current fiscal year, or are you talking about amending, what are we amending here?
So it would be the amending of the spending plan. So this is very much like an early phase plan. It's just how we intend to spend. This $5.2 million is a very unusual situation. We don't typically have that much money to spend in a short period of time on one-time expenses. So we're just looking for good ideas that sets the city up for the future. It's certainly easier to get this funded through a one-time pot of money that's available right now versus having it put in the operating budget or taking on debt to purchase a vehicle like this. So this is an extraordinary opportunity to try to get that capital expense funded early on, but it still will need to be a part of the capital improvement plan because it's likely more than a $10,000 purchase, and it will also need to be a part of the budget because there will be an ongoing operating expense.
Yes, but you're saying the mayor is already pulling together plans for spending this money, and that will be formalized into some kind of document that the council looks at some point this spring?
Yeah. He is currently putting together a spending plan. Last night at Committee of the Whole, we talked about the ARPA spending rules and also the TID spending rules.
What is ARPA?
About it. Sorry, ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act. It's $3.2 million to Fitchburg specifically for use. So the Committee of the Whole meeting last night is a good way to understand the full scope of it. The mayor is currently putting together a spending plan similar to his budget or capital improvement plan proposals, but it's much looser because we will have to do research in order to actually spend that money. But I would encourage you as a part of the Friends of the Senior Center to reach out to him and say, please consider putting this in your initial proposal. That'll be released on January 24th. So now would be the time to have it, like even sending an email tonight or tomorrow. Will probably,
really?
Yeah, or give him a call.
So he will be releasing his proposal soon. The council will be finalizing that soon?
The council can have, the alders will have an opportunity to amend that plan.
Okay, over.
Amendments will be due on February 14th.
Oh, okay. But now I'm confused, and excuse me, I think you talked about the expiration of a tax increment district. And I got mixed up between that and these funds. That's another additional new wave of, or new
It's two different pots of money,
Two-
but we're putting
Right.
together one spending plan. Obviously, which pot of money it comes out of will have to be specified. But because these are all one-time use funds, they're not meant for capital. They're not meant for operating budget because
Right.
it's a one-time pot of money.
But I'm sorry, but pardon my ignorance on this, but I would have thought that the TID money is an ongoing source. I mean, when a TID expires, there's a source of funds that had been paying for paying off some debt, right? And now,
So Bill, we can talk about this offline, but yes, the TID money is typically set aside for economic development in the district it's dedicated to. But at the end of a TID, when it's closed, if there is money left over, that goes back to the different municipalities that paid into it, which would be Dane County, Madison School District, et cetera, or I think Verona School District. That remaining money gets spread back out to the partners that paid in, and the amount that we anticipate Fitchburg will get back is $2 million. You don't always get money back from a TID closure, but sometimes you do. And when we get that money back, it's basically taxpayer money that we can use for anything that we want. There's no restrictions on how the funds can be used.
okay, I guess I thought there was a tax increment that now is not being used to pay off to retire the TID, to pay off the debt. So therefore that tax increment is ongoing.
We will not have any debt associated with this. It's been a successful TID that can pay off all of its expenses. And we will also have $2 million on top of that.
And Bill, you are correct. Now going forward, it will just be like, the TID will be dissolved. It will just be normal. But there is that funding that has already been accumulated in the TID that will be redistributed to the partners.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you, Gabriella, for spelling it out for us. I didn't realize there was this sort of deadline to get an amendment for the use of those funds. I was unaware of those funds. ARPA, you called it.
Yeah, it's all happening very quickly, unfortunately, but hopefully this is I was going to talk about it tonight anyway, so there is an opportunity for all committee members to submit ideas. The sooner the better, and there can always be part of the amendment process with the alder.
Okay, and I don't want to monopolize this topic or the time of the commission on this topic, but I would be curious to know the thoughts of other TTC members about whether we might, if we thought it prudent, play a role in that process. That is, could the Transportation and Transit Commission make a recommendation on this subject to help? Is that an appropriate thing for us to do?
Perhaps we could bring it up during the announcement section. I can again give a little preview of ARPA and just ask for your all feedback at that point.
Okay.
I think, this is Rich, I think it would be a good idea for us to band together to push a few things. There have been some things that we've discussed for decades that I think we would all like to get into a budget at some point, and we've been talking about them. I know you've got your heart close to the seniors, and you've mentioned that before. I've talked about park and rides before. I would like to see us as a group come together and make some recommendations, and maybe we can do that, like Gabrielle said, later on in the night, or maybe even, if time allows, at the next meeting. Regarding this particular agenda item, though, are we to prioritize the list of 8 documents that you provided for us? Is that what we want to accomplish tonight?
That's mainly the goal. Yep, or at least the first 2 or 3, just so we can, get ready for either next month or March meeting.
Because
yep.
Some of those are pretty major. Well, like the comp plan took years and years to work to get together. That's pretty well situated. The 2010 transit plan needs a lot of work, I think. Again, Bill mentioned the intercity transit feasibility study. Some of those are rising to the surface. And I don't know, how do you want to, as a group, go about selecting or prioritizing these documents, which ones we want to look at first?
I personally think that the comp plan would be a really great place to start, just given the fact that it's a comprehensive plan, it's overall, and integrated with the rest of the plans of the city. So I personally think that could be a really good place to start.
Well, I disagree, and what I was saying is that's the most recent or most current of all the docs that are out there. So that's the one that just got finished in the last year, whereas like the transit plan was 11 years ago. So those are the ones that I'd like to see us focus on.
Are we looking to update the documents, or are we looking to just review them for the edification of the members?
That's a good point. So from
Yeah.
what I gathered at the December meeting, it was more about a review versus a full-scale, revamp type of thing. But that certainly could be on the table, just, that we would need, depending upon the plan, we would likely need budget associated with, hiring consultants or that sort of thing.
And an approach we could take on that is to review these and then allow, as great ideas emerge from our discussion, formalize specific recommendations related to each of these if we think that's appropriate. In other words, Rich, if we wanted to advocate or push something, instead of rewriting the plan, use that as a stepping off point for a specific recommendation that we might want to make, if there's one that's appropriate that comes to light. Is
Okay.
that making any sense?
Yeah, and I could even help, because I was involved with the comp plan from twice. And so I'm very familiar with the iterations that it went through to get to where it is now, and the differences between what it was and what it is. So I'd be more than happy to address that or even prepare something if needed. But I'm good if I think we're on the right track here. If we start like maybe next time, but I guess I'd like to just pick one and just sort of say, okay, let's look at this let's really comb through this. And because to me, that transit plan really strikes me as antiquated. And is the most need to be reviewed and repaired.
Okay. So take that as a motion to look at the transit plan first. I was just a little puzzled looking at the transportation chapter of the comp plan just earlier this afternoon. It makes a reference to a 2015 transit plan. Is that the correct date, or is there a different?
I believe that was the intra-city feasibility study that was published in 2015.
Oh,
They might have referred to it as the transit plan, or the intra-city transit plan.
really? Okay. I'll just find this.
Yeah,
Just
page 3A-5 refers to the intracity transit feasibility study of 2015.
okay. Okay, so that's different from the transit plan.
Yeah, the transit plan, I don't know what I was doing those years.
Because I just not to quibble over some details, but on page 3A-7, talks about city plans and policies. It mentions a transit plan. That's the name given, adopted 2015. And maybe that's just a misnomer that they should have said the intra-city. Plan, not sure.
I see you're talking about yeah, I don't know. I would think it is the plan that was mentioned in the previous pages. But let's not get bogged down, I guess, in.
Okay, but Rich, you would like to first up on our agenda, talk about the transit plan.
Yeah, should we look at that next month, do you think would be a good time? Well, let me back up. Gabriella kind of threw a kink in my thinking earlier, because I think the CIP, you do that all the time, Gabriella. I think the CIP work should take a priority, and maybe the documents are something that we need to address, but it's not at the same urgency as what to do with all this money that's newfound wealth.
Yeah, this is Troy, I'd agree with that. I think next month, that pot of money, the spending from the two sources, I think that should be our very immediate focus. And the transit plan would follow on to that a little bit, and it may alter our thinking based on exactly what gets funded on the transit plan.
I actually, to be honest, I think we should have that conversation about ARPA, that one-time pot of money today,
Okay,
because by the next meeting, it will be almost the deadline for the Alder amendments because of how fast this is moving. So
Okay,
When
I
is,
think we should talk about the plans next week for sure, but I think if we have like a broad conversation, these proposals do not need to be incredibly detailed. The spending plan will be a very much like an early phase plan where more of the details will be ironed out at the later date. So we can have kind of a more brainstorm discussion towards the end here, and I think accomplish some things for a proposal to the mayor.
okay, just to clarify on our agenda, was it your suggestion that that would be part of this agenda item, or that at the end of this agenda item, or later in the evening?
I see we either do it as, if Andrew is gonna talk about it, I don't know if Andrew was planning to talk about this department report, but I would either have the conversation then, or I can bring it up again during the announcements and we can have that discussion then. That's what I would suggest.
Okay, and I will honor that suggestion, and we don't have to belabor it, we can do it that way. We did, but Rich, do you want to still push for, in terms of making a decision on when to talk about things, do the transit plan next time?
I think that's a good place to start, and we can just play it by ear and, you know, as we go along, if we find we have to punt and change, but I think top of the list, the oldest, and we can just maybe just focus on one document at a time. That would be, to me, the one I'd prefer. I think it also ties in with your intercity transit and even with the comp plan transportation.
Okay. All right. Thoughts on other of these items? What is transportation studies? I clicked on that, and there's a whole list of things there, and that seems like a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, I didn't want to put it in individual neighborhood plans and that sort of, and you know, traffic impact studies and that sort of thing. So I think that's a collection of individual studies. Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we could kind of handle them collectively and just kind of pick out one or two and say this is kind of what these look like, that sort of thing. But otherwise, I don't know how much value that is. Those are more anecdotal, kind of one-off, depending on the neighborhood.
Okay. Another question, Andrew, from the minutes last time, it says that you were planning on a parking ordinance public meeting in late January, that is soon. And one of the items on the list is parking policy.
Yep. Yeah.
What's going to happen with that?
Yeah, good catch there. And that was going to be one of my announcements. So yes, we're looking at Monday, January 31st. I'll talk about that a little bit later too, but it's primarily just talking about parking ordinances. The document I included in kind of all the overall documents is a planning document for driveway and parking policy, mainly about rates. So, rates per unit, that sort of thing. Whereas what we're going to be talking about on the 31st is mainly the ordinances where parking is prohibited, alternate side parking. So more the ordinance side of things. But yes, that's a good point that document really is oriented more towards kind of development review of parking and those standards that apply, that planning and public works apply to developments.
Okay. But does that ordinance have any? There is a parking ordinance then, which is different. What is that about?
Yeah, so it's basically just a review of all parking ordinances. We're going to dive into specifically the winter alternate side parking and emergency snow and ice declarations, and then as well the prohibited parking, and kind of dive into some specific examples. So that's kind of the plan for that. I don't really have a document related to that.
So that no ordinance has been drafted and introduced to council or anything. It's,
No, yeah, so this, I think the plan, we've talked a little bit about this last year, or, at the beginning of the year last year for winter parking. Some other ordinances have come up, so this is kind of a public meeting to kind of kick off some ordinance changes.
okay. I did want to mention, you prepared a very nice list for us a couple of meetings ago. And I'm going to fumble around and see if I can find it, of things. It was called Possible Meeting Topics in 2022. Kind of a similar idea to your list that we're looking at here. And it had a couple of things on it that didn't make the current list. One was a traffic safety meeting, and another was a traffic sign inventory. Are those, what are your thoughts about, or what are anybody's thoughts about when to take those up?
Yep, and I'll just interject real fast. So, yes, so I think that's what started this conversation in December of here's some possible meeting topics. I think some of the consensus of the group was let's focus on some of the past, building that knowledge base back up.
Okay.
Focus on planning documents. So that's why I kind of pared down the list to just planning documents.
Okay, which is fine.
And I don't have any associated with those two efforts, but I'm happy to talk more about them.
No, it's we've got enough to talk about unless they force their way into our agenda. Okay. So we have a suggestion by Rich, and I haven't heard anybody argue against it, to take up the transit plan at our next meeting. Other things are moving forward. At what point will we be asked to comment on the Madison Metro redesign? When will they have something in front of us to?
The latest I heard was February. First part of the year is kind of generalization, and so I'm expecting it might not be ready by next meeting, but by the March meeting.
Okay, so that's something we're going to have to deal with. We're going to talk some more about ARPA, two sources of funds, later this evening. Are there other thoughts or comments about any of these policy items and when to deal with them as a commission? And do we have a consensus that sooner rather than later, we'll dig into the comprehensive plan and make ourselves informed about what's in that?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm not sure what else to do at this point with this item. I'm comfortable moving on to the next item on the agenda unless somebody has some other discussion. Hearing none, we're on to action items. The first of which is Resolution R-22521, adopting the City of Fitchburg Annex to the Dane County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. Does anyone want to move that we endorse that?
I'll move to approve Resolution R-225-21.
All right, thank you. That was Rich, I think. Second?
Second.
For purpose of discussion.
You're a very reliable go-to for a second, Gabriella. So we've got that. Is there any, Andrew, why don't you introduce that for us and tell us what that is?
So I don't have a ton of history on this. Joe's the main contact for this, and so I'm happy to send it over to Joe.
All right, so hello everyone. As your emergency management director for the city of Fitchburg, I was contacted by Dane County to provide input to their mitigation plan. One thing that I should probably point out is the fact that this is not Fitchburg's document. This is our contribution to a Dane County document that addresses mitigation. To define mitigation, basically we are stating that we are trying to address any sustained action that's needed to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to human life and property from a hazard event. So to give you an example, some of the things that we identified through our audit and through some of the emergencies that we've responded to is the fact that we need to pay attention to flooding, and we need to pay attention to things that have impacted us from a natural hazard situation in the past, and that an example of that would be tornadoes. So I presented our initial data to the Common Council as far as what we were providing to the county, and it was requested that we at least bring this forward to some other committees and commissions so that they're aware of what we're submitting to Dane County, and they have the ability to provide input in the event that we're missing anything. But like I said, we just basically tried to identify what our overall liabilities are from a retail standpoint, property value standpoint, and then taking a look at some of the things that we've responded to or had happened in the city of Fitchburg in the past. We've reported on that as well. This is something that the county does, I believe, once every 5-ish years. This is the first time I've been involved in it, having come to the city of Fitchburg in 2016. So I just want to leave it there. The information that I forwarded through this resolution gives you an idea of some of the things that we are reporting to Dane County. And then what Dane County is going to do is they'll put all of this together, and in the event that we need to address anything from a natural hazard response strategy, FEMA will see some of the things that we have already collected to identify some of those vulnerabilities. One of the things that we saw pick up a little bit over the past 5 years is the flooding, for example, down in the Lake Barney area. And some of those mitigation strategies are already in the process through Village of Oregon, Town of Oregon, and City of Fitchburg resources. We have also identified the fact that the city is looking at a sustainability strategy to address some of the things that may impact us in the future, not only from a response standpoint, but our contributions to climate and the environment. So I'll stop there just so that I don't get too far in depth in the event that you have any questions that I can address immediately.
This is Rich. I have a question, if I can monopolize tonight's meeting, it looks like. Are all the documents that we're looking at, were they provided by Dane County? So the maps and all that we see, and you basically were giving a set of documents that they wanted you to complete?
Yeah, so the maps that are provided, I took from our city's map cache.
Okay.
That being the flooding insurance survey.
Yeah, FIRM.
So I got that through the city. The reason I'm providing that wasn't necessarily asked for from Dane County. I'm providing it because it shows where we have had some activity in the past.
I was just curious because I couldn't. They were too vague, or not vague, but I couldn't make them out. I couldn't zoom in.
Yeah, but the reason I put that in there, I also put some of the specifications as far as, I think there's numbers associated with each map that if you were to pull up that survey, you would be able to see that map in greater detail. The map that's provided is just for reference.
Okay.
So Joe, this is we're looking at, I guess, the first 5-year review of an existing plan or existing document. What is anything significant changed from last time, from when it was originally adopted?
Yeah, I think your significant changes are going to be seen in the amount of property that we have in the city of Fitchburg. Obviously, we've had significant development, so therefore, some of our higher taxpayers, I evaluated the top 10 taxpayers, for example, gives you an idea of some of the property value that has increased in the city of Fitchburg, which there too, it increases our liability. I shouldn't say liability, you know what our exposure to damage in the event that something comes through. And then also some of the flooding activity. I mean, I mentioned Lake Barney already. So between that property value and population, that gives you an idea of how the city is growing and maybe some of the impacts on that growth.
I didn't see a listing of the city facilities, the risks per se, or the mitigation strategies. Is there a separate list of those?
So
You know, because of the new fire stations and that type of stuff, I assume they're built more resilient and so forth.
They're built with sustainability in mind. It's one of the reasons we didn't go with a pole barn concept, for example, and built with block and brick. Those buildings are more sustainable during higher winds and things of that nature. Those are things that were considered. From a mitigation strategy standpoint, I think at this point, from the city's perspective, it's a matter of identifying some areas that we can evaluate over the next 5 years to be able to provide recommendation in the future. Right now, it's hard to commit any significant dollars to any projects that hasn't necessarily been through an existing approval process. So I'm cautious to provide too much in the way of mitigation strategies that is never going to be funded. I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver versus the opposite. So I want to make sure.
My comment was more for staff and your office to consider going forward, is to make it clear that there's a focus on the city. I don't know if there are any state facilities. I don't know if there are any county facilities per se in the city, but those to me are a key part of government. Is, you know, if the garage with the plowing trucks gets demolished, then and the trucks are inside, we're all in trouble. So
Yeah, and
that type of stuff.
Yeah, so state and county facilities, we have both. The state facilities could be anything from the DNR to the correctional facility. From a county standpoint, mostly parks, things like that, but we have facilities that are represented local, county, state.
Okay,
And federal, if you talk about U.S. wildlife.
right.
It's a lot of work that went into that.
And the other question I had was, hey, this is an impressive document, a lot of information, but I couldn't see in it anything about transportation policy. I mean, in other words, how this document intersects with our mission in life and the Transportation and Transit Commission. Does anybody have a thought about that, Andrew, or anybody else?
I could interject once before Andrew. I think one of the things from a transportation standpoint, if you were to use one example, it would probably be something like Fitchburg Road. When flooded, is not passable. So from a road standpoint, when we have roads that are not passable during flooding, it's one thing if that's only a couple of hours. If that becomes a couple of days, I can see where that would probably transcend into your purview.
Yeah. Right. Right, good. Thank you.
And we did acknowledge the fact that Fitchburg Road on occasion during heavy rains is an issue for us.
Got 9 years listed.
Yeah. It's there, and that's just the ones that we knew about and we can prove.
I'm familiar with it
Yep.
from both the bike path and the driving through there and having to turn all the way around and go all the way back out. So, yeah.
Yeah, because if you try to go through it, you might be there a while.
No, I'm not that dumb.
Yeah.
I can do dumb things, but
No, we highly
Okay,
recommend not driving through it.
Yeah.
You're right.
okay, okay. All right, thank you.
So, Bill, if I may, I apologize. I
Yeah.
think the only approval that I'm really looking for here is the fact that you acknowledge the information that we gathered, we really don't have much in the way of action items, other than the fact that you've had an opportunity to see the document. You know what we're reporting to the county, and you're aware of the fact that when the county presents its natural hazard mitigation plan, everybody in the county has the ability to comment on that and provide input.
Right, right. Okay. The one, I don't want to take more time than we have to, but it occurs to me that conceivably, within the transportation chapter, I guess, of the comp plan, there's some ideas about how big roads should be, what the nature of intersections should be, and so on. I suppose conceivably some of that has a place in a mitigation plan. In other words, if we're going to be ready to deal with emergencies, we need to have roads so big and intersections that can accommodate so many vehicles. But that's maybe a level of detail that's not realistic to do.
From a transportation standpoint too, maybe there's a way of prioritizing those things that we need to mitigate, and if there's something that needs to be presented at the local and therefore the county level, we can do that through a strategy, a mitigation strategy plan, and at least get that in the hands of people who may be able to provide funds or grants in the future that allow us to rectify those issues. But you can see what I've provided as far as some of the history associated with the city of Fitchburg.
Bill, this is Troy. One of the things that we need to get from, maybe as part of our metro discussions, is the city now has all of its buses in one building. Admittedly, they have to park some outside, but that may be a saving grace if something ever happened to the building. So I'd like to see some mitigation steps by Metro on what ifs, like what would happen if the bus barn got burned down and all the buses inside were lost. How would we prioritize which routes in the city, and how would that affect Fitchburg?
All right. Thank you for Joe for the information, and everybody for their comments on this. I think probably we're ready to vote on whether to approve this resolution. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none opposed, and without calling for a roll, I will say that that was approved unanimously, and we're ready to move to the next resolution.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Next resolution, R0422, authorizing transit service agreement between the city of Madison and the city of Fitchburg, a topic we discussed at some length at an earlier meeting. Do we have a motion to approve that resolution?
I move approval.
Gabriella moves approval. Any second?
Second.
Motion is second. Maybe that was Mike.
Yep.
Thank you. And so discussion, comments on this? Gabriella, you raising your hand?
Yeah. I just want to thank Andrew for putting together a great, very detailed memo that kind of walks through all the steps. I know that we've been talking about this for a while, and I've been doing my best to give an update to the council, but I think the memo is a really helpful tool for making sure that discussion in council goes smoothly. Reading through the contract, it doesn't seem like it's changed much since the last time. Can you point out any changes that have happened since the last time we discussed it?
Good question.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what you guys saw in December is virtually the same as what you're seeing now. There was a few typos that got changed, but yep. So it's really pretty close to what you've seen before. And so, before I was just kind of giving it to you as a if you want any last minute changes before we send it on to council, let me know. But yeah, this time, as Gabriella asked for, package together a memo with it. Certainly plan if you think it makes sense to invite Metro to the council meeting to be able to talk to it. And so, really just packaging together now an official resolution for approval.
Andrew, or Bill, both. This is Troy. One of the things when I read through this document was there a lot of things on what happens if partners don't live up to their obligations. I didn't see much attention to what happens if, that on the flip side is, what do we have for Metro if they don't live up to their obligations? This was obviously written by Metro's lawyers, so to speak, in a sense, from my reading. So I'd like to, I'm not quite sure how it would be done, but I think there should be some acknowledgement by Metro of similar language to what they have for partners on their obligation, and penalties or however it gets worded for the partners. So there's symmetry in that relationship. Right now, as far as I could see, all the onerous type of provisions were basically had partner next to them, and Metro doesn't have anything.
So
approaching.
Metro is not a partner in the deal?
Well,
I missed.
That's, to me,
Yeah, I hear you.
Metro and Madison to me are the same thing. I don't know, maybe that's my bias, but I'd like to see some symmetry in that, in the wording, so that there's equal obligation on Madison and Metro separately, and to me, I know they're kind of the same thing in the wording. Just for symmetry and equity.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that's a deficiency in this agreement, is that it was written by Metro's lawyers, from my viewpoint. And it doesn't take into account the obligation of Metro and Madison to live up to their end, and what happens if they don't. Admittedly, we're talking about it will not ever happen type of thing, probably, but these why you have legal agreements in the first place, is to cover things that will never happen.
Sure.
Andrew, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just clear. So they're a party in this agreement. Partners are generally referred to as, the other entity, not Madison. But yeah, that's a good point. So there are several clauses that, specific, like leading with Madison, that they'll, have clean buses and good, safe mechanical condition, that sort of thing. So I think most of their clauses are really due to, more focused on making sure we have high quality transit, whereas ours are more focused on maintaining kind of service levels and our operating reserve account as certain, fixed or within a window. And so I guess that's really the new changes now to this agreement, are primarily those new changes to kind of, not just for us, but for other partners, to kind of maintain more resiliency and kind of really more consistency over time. So I think, I totally agree with you. From the reading of it, a lot of the new stuff is really directed at partners. At the same time, certainly from a termination agreement, both parties can terminate this at any time. And I think if Metro does, then we would get our operating reserve account back, and so there is that provision. But for the most part, yeah, I agree. The language is there, and I think you're right that it was written by Metro's lawyers. I don't know if there's any substantive changes that you can recommend that we can try to tweak. And then, having said that, this is really the agreement right now for approval. We can certainly, if you want to amend the agreement and have some specific line item changes, we can pass that on as amended.
Well, I think, rather than do an amendment, I think my comments could be incorporated into a memorandum of understanding, which would accompany the document. I mean, a lot of international treaties, there's the treaty and then there's gazillion memorandums of, understanding. And I think the same approach could be done with my comments, is that the city could acknowledge, certain things, and it's an auxiliary agreement that is quite important, but, that way we don't have to go through the whole revision process for the main document.
Well, the motion on the floor is to approve this resolution.
I,
Yeah, Gabrielle?
I mean, there is a provision at the very end of termination that says, in the event of default by Madison in terms of this agreement for more than 60 days, partner may withhold additional contribution payments and direct with written notice Madison to suspend or terminate service. So there is a stipulation that if they're out of compliance with the contract, that we are eligible to withhold payment and change the terms of the contract at that point. But I mean, ultimately we pay by service hours. So if they're not providing service hours, is that right, Andrew? Like they bill us for service hours, isn't that correct?
That's correct, yep.
Yeah, so if they weren't providing service hours, for some reason, if they weren't actually running bus service, they wouldn't have anything to bill us on.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, the city might have to do they might have to make alternate transportation arrangements in certain circumstances, so. There are potential costs if the city, for some reason, like my hypothetical, the bus barn got destroyed. Could provide service then. What do we do as the city of Fitchburg?
There's also a section under section 5 performance that says that they agree to run through an independent operating company, that they can run it through an independent operating company as long as it's at the same level or better service than Madison provides. So there is a stipulation of like an alternate arrangement. I don't know who that independent partner would be, but my reading of it, I guess I don't have the same concern based on my reading of it that you shared. I think that I just don't have the same discomfort with the I just thought I'd point out those parts that I noticed.
Yeah, I'm in
Okay.
favor of.
Gabriella, you actually brought up a really good point. So, and I think, Troy, if I'm understanding you, they have stipulations saying that they can use a third-party servicer as long as they meet X amount of service level. Yet the city of Fitchburg, if we decided that we needed different service and they weren't able to accommodate, we couldn't spin up our own service at that same service level and kind of use that as a subsidy or a subsidy to the service that we have. So I kind of see Troy's point. I don't have anything substantive that I would add to it. But again, this is a contract that we have with a business partner, and we should expect, this to be a win-win on both sides.
All right, well, we need to move ahead with either voting up or down on approving this resolution. And we've heard Troy's concern. We've had some discussion about it. So I'd like to get a vote on up or down on approving this resolution as drafted. So it can go to the city council. So all those in favor.
Could I just ask one more clarifying question before we?
Yep, sure.
Andrew, just want to make sure that the city attorney and the finance director have reviewed this as well at this point.
Yep, they have, and we still have the provision that we can have changes to the contract, in the resolution, based upon an attorney review. So, yep, it went through our typical resolution approval process.
Great.
Good. All right. So anyway, this was a good discussion, some interesting concerns, but I'd like to get a vote now on up or down on the resolution. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, I will say that this resolution has been approved by the Transportation and Transit Commission. Which lets us move on to Item 8 on our agenda, report from department. So we're all looking at you, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, that public meeting at 6 o'clock, Monday, January 31st, here in the council chambers and also online. We'll be posting that next Monday on the website, and it'll go out in the paper at that time as well. But that will really be, again, focusing on parking ordinances, specifically winter parking, alternate side parking, as well as some prohibited parking. And we'll be talking about, ordinances, some issues that we have currently, and potentially some options, and just get feedback from folks about, what might work best. Otherwise, in terms of projects, Sain Road reconstruction, so that would be the full reconstruction of it north of Lacey. And so that is at 30% design review. The next time you'll see that is probably either in February or March with our transportation project plat, giving us approval for permanent and temporary easements. Lacey Road, we're nearing 90% design completion. We're a little bit further behind on the roundabout design, but we will be getting that 30% design here soon, and then we'll be moving into real estate as well there. And then as far as the Lacey Road reconstruction project, we're moving ahead with property acquisition, so that continues. So, and we'll be, just to let everybody know, we'll count the first thing in that pipeline this spring will be the tree clearing ahead of the rest of the project. That will be a separate contract because we have to have the trees cleared by June 1st ahead of the brown bat maternity season. So just a heads up on that. And then as well, I did have a note in here. So I think at the last meeting, in addition to talking about getting some of these planning documents and policies, we also talked a little about the website and building that kind of knowledge management. I did follow up with some IT folks, and it sounds like that's doable, not on our TTC website, because those committee websites, I think the preference is to kind of leave that format the same. But we can certainly put a link on that to a separate website that lives on the Public Works, main page, and so that can have a variety of things from, the things we talked about last time, kind of the purpose, some of the core planning documents, like the list I provided you today. And in addition, to the extent you guys want to, provide this, some of that, core knowledge that you guys have maintained, as Rich mentioned, multiple rounds of the comp plan, those sorts of things, I think we can start planning that out and laying out the new site. So, I'm happy to take a crack at it and then kind of do a draft, or if you guys want to give me kind of subject headings, I can devote a little bit of time to that next meeting if you like. So those are some of the big things from the department. Any questions?
Okay. Questions, anybody? Hearing none, let's go to announcements. And Gabriella, this was when you thought we might have a little discussion of the ARPA funds.
Yeah, so I have a couple of announcements in addition to that. So first is we purchased a drone at the December council meeting. There was a donation from the Burby Walsh family that covered the upfront capital costs. So that is coming to the city soon, and then they'll work on it's going to be shared between police, fire, Fact TV, and Public Works. So I assume that might have some implications for transportation, Andrew. I don't know if you've had any ideas about what that would look like, but that is available in the city sometime this year, which is kind of exciting. I also wanted to mention the Edgewood project is going before the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission tonight. If you're not familiar, that Edgewood is building wanting to build an athletic facility on the corner of Lacey and Sain Road, right where all that construction is going to be happening very soon. It's going to be an athletic facility with all sorts of different athletic fields, soccer, tennis, track and field, etc., and also a wetland restoration for their environmental studies science students. I know I have heard concerns from residents about the transportation impact and the traffic impact of that project. And so you may hear of things like that as well, but anyway, that's all to say that the council passed a resolution to expand the urban service area to accommodate that project, and it is going before the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission as we speak. I believe the public hearing is happening right now. And I don't know if Rich, as part of the Plan Commission, or Andrew wanted to add anything before I moved to.
I would like to make a point on that, the Edgewood thing, that's a perfect use of that site. That site has been a closed kettle. It's underwater a lot, and the athletic facilities will actually be pretty much be porous. So we won't have to worry about the impervious surface, the water running off, more flooding. So personally, I think it's just an excellent use of that land.
And yeah, I can certainly talk. So as far as transportation impacts, yep, I saw some resident concerns about that. So we did do, as part of the Lacey Road project, there was kind of a overall road traffic analysis, specifically at the intersections, but also at the road itself. One of the impacts of that and a subsequent traffic impact study for the site was looking at left turn lanes for left turns into that property, so that through vehicles can still get through. So those have been added and are at attributed as a development cost for the development. So that won't be paid for as the projects for the overall Lacey Road project. So just to clarify that, and that was primarily the main impact, because a lot of these will be off-peak hours. We won't see those site-generated trips having too big impacts associated with the on-street AM PM rush hours.
Okay. Go ahead. Other announcements, Gabriella?
Those are the two main ones. Besides, I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the about that 5.2 million of funds. I sent an email to all of you just now, or a little bit earlier, with the information. So there's the full schedule. I have a link to the full schedule, but the two major dates are January 4th is when the mayor is going to release his spending plan for all $5.2 million, and that's 3.2 million in federal funds that have restrictions, about 2 million in tax increment district windfall that will have no spending restrictions for us. His spending plan will include all of that 5.2 million. January 24th is the release date for that. There will be a public hearing on February 8th at that common council meeting, and then February 14th is the date that the amendments are due to the finance director. So she has to have them in hand on that date. So anything that's not included in the mayor's initial plan could be amended by an alder-sponsored amendment that will be then discussed through the rest of the process, which is laid out in the schedule. I also included a link to the committee of the whole meeting that gives a lot more detail about how the ARPA money can be used and just an overall discussion of the spending plan. But my recommendation is that if the committee has specific ideas they want to submit, I would recommend that Bill, as chair of the TTC, sends an email to the mayor ASAP, letting him know what the committee recommends, and maybe we could even take an unofficial vote in support of some of these projects, and make a request that he consider them for his initial spending plan. If those items are not included, then we can discuss at our next meeting. If you potential amendment, we can. And Andrew, if you wouldn't mind putting that, Bill and Andrew, if you wouldn't mind putting that as a discussion item on our next agenda, that would be helpful, especially if it's before February 14th. If it's after February 14th, it's going to be kind of a moot point because we'd have to have that conversation prior to the meeting.
What is the date of the next meeting? Do you know?
It'll be the 10th.
It'll be the
Okay.
10th.
Perfect.
So it seems to me I'm not quite ready to draft something to ask you guys to approve to send to the mayor right now, but by the 10th, we can have that, and the Friends of the Senior Center can have thought about the situation and responded. So
I do want to add too that my assumption is that Joe McCone has already reached out to the mayor about potentially including that in his spending plan. I don't know, but maybe you want to touch base with the senior center on that front and make sure that someone's reached out about that project. But Rich, based on our conversation at the last TTC meeting, I actually specifically called out land acquisition for park and rides, in particular on Fitchburg Road, as a potential option. I did specifically call that out, but if we want to make that recommendation, or Rich, if you want to reach out to the mayor with that idea prior to his initial proposal, that is something that is on the table to do, and I probably will bring that forward as an amendment, because I do think that that's a great idea that we've already discussed a little bit. I probably will bring that forward as an amendment no matter what, if it is not included in the initial proposal.
Thank you. And I'll follow up.
very interesting.
That is something that I have been looking at in previous iterations on this board, back even 10, 12 years ago. Wanted to see the buses serve the schools, and I wanted to see the acquisition of property when you could afford it.
Yeah, I don't know, well, I guess I don't want to prolong this meeting, but I do think it's a good idea. And Gabriella, thanks for putting this information together for us in this email. I'm just looking at it now. So anyway, with that said, are there other announcements or discussion about what Gabriella has said?
I'd like to add one. I'd like to hear from the others, Troy and Michael, if there's any projects that you guys would be, that we haven't even thought of, or things that you think should bubble up to the surface.
This is Troy. I noticed that they put in a nice bus stop for the westbound, on McKee Road there, but there's no corresponding bus stop on the other side. And I think maybe there wasn't enough room for it, and to me, there should be a corresponding bus stop on the other side, because to me, it makes no sense to have something almost a quarter mile apart that are matching bus stops. So to me, one of the projects that could be done would be to put a matching bus stop, probably on the Walgreens part of the block there. Not exactly across, but close enough so it's visible from the other one. Because right now, unless you know that where the other stop is, you can't see it. The other stop, unless you know where to look. So to me, one of the projects, I think it costs about $100,000 to get the shelter and the cutout, into the road. There have to be some redesign there of that specific area, some drainage issues. So to me, that's a project that could be done to make.
Could you send me where you're, so you're talking about on McKee Road?
Yeah, McKee Road, right at the intersection with Fish Hatchery. There's only a westbound stop that was put in on the Fish Hatchery Reconstruction. There's no eastbound stop to match. They left the eastbound one where it is now, which to me, I'm not quite sure what was done, why it was done that way, but I was kind of surprised when I drove on there the first time and I couldn't see a matching one on the other side.
And I think just to clarify, I think that's primarily the 75 steps there at the westbound, as well as the 49. I think eastbound just was kind of out of the project limits for where we ended, so that's why
that's what I'm suggesting is we use some of the money to put one. Probably you can't put it as close to the corner as it is, but to me, right where the Walgreens pickup driveway area is, might be a good spot for it. So to me, that's a project that could be added.
Yep, and just to clarify on what the 75, the commuter service, the city doesn't pay for that, so it stops where
I
where the funders
understand,
choose.
but I
certainly there's
having ridden that a
flexibility.
lot, I tell you that the city has benefited significantly from having that stop or that route paid for by there. So I think, given the source of funding and it's a one-time deal, I think it'd be a good use of those funds.
All right, another topic for discussion at our next meeting. I suppose conceivably we could put together a set of recommendations for the deadline of February 14th for amendments to that plan, to the mayor's plan. Okay, any further discussion at this point?
I have one. I think there was the flashing pedestrian crossing indicators were there was some budget discussion there on the council and so forth. So I think one was left out as costing too much money. This might be another.
You start referring to the RRF, the rapid rectangular rapid flashing beacon?
I think
The-
I'm going
the
from memory
lights on-
here, but I think the one that was left out, that could be funded as well through this process.
No, the lights on Seminole Highway was passed in the budget.
They were both included, or I thought there was two. I'm going on memory here, so I'm kind of,
No, my recollection is there was only one, for a pedestrian crossing safety on Seminole Highway.
okay,
near the
all right.
middle.
I seem to
That was-
recall a discussion of a second one, maybe that didn't actually make it into the formal budget proposal, but that's just something that I think that if, Andrew might be able to, might have more resources to find out if, there are other valid sources for pedestrian crossing indicators, that this might be a good use of the funds as well.
All right. Any other last comments in the line of announcements? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you. I heard of Troy and Rich, I think.
Yeah.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you very much. We are adjourned.